Thank you very much for coming today. At Foundations Commercial, we have tried to schedule like quarterly type of informational settings where we're bringing in guest speakers to educate not only our clients but our partners and things like that. And I want to make sure and open it up to all of you when we're done to ask any question you want. So that's this environment. We're also filming today, so thank you for Kayla Higginbotham for your expertise. Bear Creative is filming us today, so you'll be able to review this if you weren't able to come. As I'm looking at the camera on our YouTube page, and we'll also do some follow-up via our email with additional links and ways to get in touch with our speaker and the Kansas Department of Commerce. So here we go. Tayton Majors is our guest speaker today. He serves as the Regional Director of Business Development of the Kansas City Metro at the Kansas Department of Commerce. He covers 4 of the 5 counties that make up the Kansas side of the Metro, including Johnson, Wyandotte, Douglas, and Shawnee counties, where he works directly with businesses, local officials, and economic development professionals to support growth, expansion, and long-term investment in the region. Since joining the department, Tayton has overseen hundreds of millions of dollars in capital investment and worked with companies ranging from 10-person manufacturers to major service providers with thousands of employees. And we're going to talk about all of that in a minute. So, Tayton, thanks for joining us today. And I'm Kirsten Flory with Foundations Commercial. I think I know most of you in the room, and it's nice to see some new faces. We actually had almost 40 people RSVP to this, so I think, we have some slackers that didn't show up tonight, so they'll have to watch us on video. All right, well, let's get started to talk about state and local and regional and national incentive programs that provided by the State Department of Commerce. What are the primary incentive programs currently available for new and expanding businesses in Kansas?
Well, thanks everyone for being here. It looks like I scared off some of the crowd, so you guys are the troopers. I'm glad you're here. So I think if I were to give an exhaustive list of all the things we have to have to offer at Kansas Department of Commerce, I'd get booed off the microphone. But I'll focus on some of the most lucrative and the top 4 that we use in the business development team. So the first program is HPIP, which stands for High Performance Incentive Program. That's a program that's for capital expansion. If a business is expanding through capital, that's the incentive that we'd utilize. We have the PEAK program, another acronym that's an acronym for Promoting Employment Across Kansas. And then we have 2 sister programs, one known as Kansas Industrial Training and one known as Kansas Industrial Retraining. Those are the primary focus of most of the businesses that we engage with as the business development team. And I'd say that those are the most heavily utilized programs.
So how does the state determine eligibility for these programs, and what criteria is most important?
So wages are going to be important for each of these programs. One thing that's consistent throughout each of the programs that the Kansas Department of Commerce offers to businesses is that high wages are being paid within the state of Kansas, but it's traditionally not too hard for our businesses to meet those wage standards. For the PEAK and KIT and KER programs, we just look at the county median wage. That takes into consideration things like retail, restaurant, minimum wage positions throughout the county. So it usually averages out that somewhere around the mid 40,000 range. So if your average wage is beyond that, you would qualify for both PEAK and KIT and KER. For the HPIP program, we look a little bit more specifically at your NAICS code. And based on that code, we look at your region. And if you're paying 1 cent more than those businesses that operate within the same realm, or if you're setting that wage standard by being the only business that operates within your NAICS code in your region, you would qualify for the HPIP program. So wage is definitely something important to consider. There are other considerations and more nuanced details that we have to look at. For example, for the PEAK program, we ask that companies provide a health care option to their employees. And if you're not a headquarters or a manufacturer but still want to qualify for some of our incentives, we ask that 51% of your revenue come from out of state. So those are some of the things that we'll look at, and there's more that'll come, but those are the primary things that we look at in order to ensure that a business meets our standards.
Great. Can you give us some case study examples of the different incentive programs that you mentioned, starting with HPIP, for example?
Yeah, so are you talking about specific businesses? So I think that oftentimes we hear about businesses like Panasonic or Garmin capitalizing on tens of millions of dollars in incentives from the state of Kansas. But some of my favorite examples are actually the smaller companies with 1 or 2 employees that are trying to make ends meet, trying to become profitable, expand those margins. And I think one of my favorite examples is out of Lenexa, Kansas. We had a business called Alpha Robotics. He does training for manufacturers all across the region, and all across the state of Kansas, really. And, he purchases a lot of equipment, but doesn't have a lot of employees. In fact, there have been many times when it was just him offering the training to businesses throughout the state of Kansas. But he has to purchase hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment on an annual basis. And it is constantly upgrading and updating. And so he has to continuously buy this equipment and upgrade this equipment. And, awareness is always our biggest issue at the Kansas Department of Commerce with our incentives. If people don't know about them, they can't utilize them. So that's why we try to get out as much as we can at events like this and ensure that people are aware of these incentives, because they can really be a difference maker for companies. And in the case of Alpha Robotics, he was able to get the comprehensive sales tax exemption for this year, and he's looking to save upwards of $150,000 on all the equipment that he's purchased just on that comprehensive sales tax exemption, and that's not to mention the sales tax credit that comes along with it.
Okay, now let's switch gears. I'm gonna go through your incentive programs here. So give me a case study. I think a lot of it, unless we ourselves or had clients engage specifically in those programs, I think sometimes it's hard, at least for me, I know when I first started engaging in those programs, to understand, okay, what does that look like? Like, what does that incentive even offer? So let's flip gears for a second. What about the PIP program? Give us a case study example.
Absolutely. So the PEAK program is one that is often, I think, underutilized, because sometimes different counties throughout the state of Kansas think that they won't meet the requirements. And specifically with the PEAK program, we are looking at metro counties that are adding 10 employees within a period of 2 years. So if ever it is the case that a business is significantly expanding and adding at least 10 employees within 2 years, they would be eligible for the PEAK program. And a specific example of that more recently would be Cardinal Brush, based out of Olathe, Kansas. They were looking at an expansion of their operations, and they were going to be adding 12 people. So in order to make that more lucrative, to kind of account for that, loss that they'll be taking on by, adding employment, or that cost that they're paying, they were able to utilize the PEAK program. So all of the withholding tax, or I should say 95% of the withholding tax for each of those employees, instead of going to the state of Kansas, goes directly to the business in the form of a quarterly check. So, they're going to be looking at tens of thousands of dollars from those employees on an annual basis, just by virtue of adding employment within the state of Kansas. So that's kind of how the program works.
That's great. And then I imagine within each of these programs, is there a sunset or a time limit where they can take advantage of those types of incentives?
Yes. So for HPIP, it's once you receive the tax credits, you can actually utilize those tax credits in perpetuity for 15 years. That's something that makes it really lucrative. The PEAK program lasts for about 7 years. It ranges from 7 to 10 years, depending on the size of your project. So if it's just right around that 10 employees, you're probably looking at 7 years. And then you can reapply as soon as that PEAK contract is fulfilled. So say 15 jobs, and you do that in 2 years, you can end that PEAK agreement and start a new one immediately after. So that's a brilliant part about the PEAK program, is just as soon as you complete what you've set forth for in your preliminary documentation to the state of Kansas, you can move on to the next project. So you're not limited in how many projects you can take on. And for the KIT and KER program, you are only able to apply once every 2 years, so that's just something to keep in mind. But I think those are the most underutilized programs that we offer.
Okay, speaking of the KIT and KER programs, can you provide some case studies as far as companies that have utilized those?
Yes, so the reason I like talking about KIT and KER so much is because it's vastly underutilized, as I mentioned. So the KIT program is essentially a grant for any business within the state of Kansas. It doesn't matter if there's 1 employee or 1,000. You can incur benefits of $1,200 to $2,000 per employee from the state of Kansas, and that's an outright grant. The whole reasoning behind setting up that program was because we understand that when you hire somebody as a company, for the first month or so, they aren't going to necessarily be productive for the business. And that's because they're receiving the training that's necessary to get them up to speed. And so to incentivize that increase in employment, but also to allow you to train those individuals, we have created a grant, $1,200 to $2,000 you can utilize for each of those new employees within a calendar year. The sister program to that is the Kansas Industrial Retraining Program, and that's for employees that you already have. In any given year, a business isn't always going to be adding significant employment, but we do understand that constantly there's this upskilling that's happening in businesses throughout the state, and we want to reward that as well. And so the CUR program stands to do exactly that. So as you upskill and train employees within any given year, we will match your payment up to $1,200 to $2,000 for each of those employees. So say, for example, that you are utilizing a new software, and every single one of your employees is going to have to be trained on that, and that's going to take time away from their day-to-day operations. You can apply for those Kansas Industrial Retraining Funds, and we'll match what you put in dollar for dollar, each of those benefits. And the thing is, if the training is coming from within the business, so in-house training is happening, you can also use the salary of that person that you are paying to offer the training that they're taking away from their regular job as your match. So it's not even necessarily an increase of what you would be paying anyway. So we see cases of businesses that have one employee, 2 employees, and businesses with hundreds of employees utilizing the KIT and KER program. If I were to give a specific example, I'd reference, I had a small bakery that recently started shipping their baked goods across the country, so they started to use a manufacturing NAICS code, NAICS code, and they were able to use that funding to add 4 new employees through the KIT program, and they also upskilled many of their employees in order to learn new baked good processes, buy new equipment with the HPIP program. So really any size of business, I'd say, can benefit from utilizing each of our big 3.
That's really fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. Are there specific incentives that are geared more towards small businesses versus large businesses?
Yeah, so, other than just saying that the big 3 programs can be used by any business no matter the size, we actually do have a lot of tailored programming that's specifically made for small businesses. So not only do we have a dedicated small business office, but the whole ecosystem in the state of Kansas is primarily geared towards small business. That's because the federal standard for what constitutes a small business is under 500 employees. I don't think anybody here would consider a 400 employee plant a small business, but by the federal standards it is. So a lot of the ecosystem that we operate within in Kansas Department of Commerce is geared towards ensuring that small businesses do have advantages. And I know that real estate professionals and bankers, you're frequently working with retail and restaurant, and they're not traditionally eligible for incentives like the ones I mentioned, like KIT, KER, HPIP, PEAK. And so the best thing that you could do is connect them with our small business office. Our small business office, headed by Taylor Overton, is just going to be your one-stop shop for small business. They're connected with financiers, Network Kansas, the small business development centers throughout the state of Kansas, and they will get you the resources you need if you're a small business. I think that, you hear statistics about businesses, especially small businesses, that fail within a few years of operation, and that's so sad to hear because many of them are not engaging with the resources that are available, and part of that's awareness, and part of that's just lack of understanding as to what small business services are provided. So I would say that I'm not well equipped to speak on all of the things they offer because the breadth of what they offer is so much. So I'd say that the best thing you could do is get in contact with Kansas Department of Commerce and meet directly with the small business office because they're teaming and ready to help small businesses, but it's all about getting in the front door. So I would say connect with our small business office, absolutely.
How does the State Department of Commerce define small business? What are the parameters that would include somebody in that?
So ironically, we use the same federal standard. So, our small business office will work with any company that's under 500 employees. I'll tell you that typically we're engaging with businesses that are, 5 employees, 10 employees, 25 employees on the small business side. But that's not to say that some of the small business services that are offered extend to businesses with 100 or 200 employees. So we don't set a different standard. Our clientele is different than what it is at the federal level, I would say. No different standard. I'd say that the small business office is traditionally geared for companies less than 50 employees, though.
Tate, I'm going to ask you a question that wasn't on the sheet I provided you with, just to keep you on your toes. What is the state looking at right now in your department and what you're hearing? Where is the opportunity for growth? Is it with big business? Is it with small business? Is it with startup? Is it innovation? What lanes do we see that are ripe for the picking?
So I think innovation is our sweet spot. I think that we want to be at the forefront of developing technology, and I think you can see that with the administration's current strategic plan. We're not looking at old guard industries because we know that we can build those, and we have set up a system that benefits those types of businesses. But now we're directing our full attention towards the innovation ecosystem. And that doesn't mean that you have to be taking on some brand new technology or operating in some crazy space. We're looking at innovators, small businesses, entrepreneurs who are looking to grow rapidly within the state of Kansas. You know, we like to have the people who have the seed, and we just like to water that seed, you know, to give an analogy, because that's always our target. You know, the big businesses, they have large profit margins, you know, they know how to operate, they use CPAs, they have advisors and consultants. And I'd say that the direction that we're taking is our small businesses, our rural communities, because that's just a great place for growth and a place that's been historically disadvantaged. But I'll say that even in our urban and metro communities, we're really targeting the young entrepreneur, the person who's coming out of KUIP, businesses that are looking to grow there. I've seen some amazing cases coming out of KU Innovation Park, and I think that's really where we have a lot of room for growth, is the bright young minds that are developing new ideas, and ensuring that we are, you know, providing a great state for them to operate within in terms of the business environment and growing rapidly.
So what would you say from your perspective is missing? So if you have a business that wants to grow, whether they're existing in Kansas already or they're wanting to come to the state, if I were to say, you know, Tayton, what are they saying to you? We wish we had this. I mean, how can we be competitive? Is it other states are offering other types of programs, other types of incentives? I mean, how can we stay competitive?
Well, honestly, I'd say that the biggest hurdle is awareness. I think for decades, Kansas, to the international world and to the national, you know, just the nation, we've been considered a flyover state, you know, and so you try to change the marketing, you try to ensure that places know who you are, and I think we've done a good job of that through offering competitive incentives that are really, honestly, better than most of the nation. And so, you know, sometimes you have to use the carrot in order to incentivize investment into your state. But I'd say that overall awareness is our biggest issue. I mean, if I had a magic wand, I'd say that every small business gets the money they'd like. And I'd say that a lot of our innovators have had trouble with financing, and I think we're working hard to try to address that with programs like the Kansas Angel Investor Tax Credit. And I know we have a question about innovation coming, so I'll save that. But I think that definitely, if I had a magic wand, I would increase the awareness that the state of Kansas has and the amount of capital available for the young companies, because you know, we can't necessarily just pay for every company to thrive. We can only offer so much technical assistance and, you know, incentivizing through taxes and things like that. But I would love to see more investment into young, budding companies within the state of Kansas.
So on that vein, let's talk about technology and innovation and startups. How does the Department of Commerce support those types of industries specifically?
Yeah, so now I get to talk about the Kansas Angel Investor Tax Credit Program. So this is a program that I find extremely interesting, not only because I'm on the committee who determines what businesses will get that funding, but just because I think it's a brilliant way to allow Kansas investors to be invested in young and entrepreneurial companies. But it's also a way for those companies to grow. I'll give you some case studies. KAITC, and I won't say the business's name just because I'm not sure if they're fully through the process yet, but I'll tell you that they've developed innovative technology in agriculture, in pharmaceuticals, and all of these companies come to us with the same issue, is that we're looking for investment. And they're not always, they don't always know how to engage with these venture capital firms throughout the country. There's not a lot of, we're not teaming with venture capital in the state of Kansas. So this is a way that we can stimulate that growth. And the Kansas Angel Investor Tax Credit is only part of it. We do have an entire innovation ecosystem and an innovation team headed by Romaine Redmond, who's a recent addition to the Kansas Department of Commerce. And I'll give you a case study. I recently mentioned Kansas University's Innovation Park, and we have so many brilliant companies that come out of that area. And more recently, we had a company that came to us, and they were considering the state of Kansas or the state of Texas. But what they didn't understand about Kansas, even though they wanted to stay there, was whether the critical mass was there for their company to succeed within the state. They were looking to collect refrigerant from old refrigerant lines, vehicles, anywhere that they could, but they just didn't know if the critical mass was there for them to establish a business within the state of Kansas. So I put the innovation team on the task, and they were able to create an itemized map that showed the company that it was right to choose Kansas, that they had exactly what they needed, and they didn't have to move to Texas, which I'll tell you is a hotbed of economic development, and many companies are looking to move to Texas. So it's always rough when you're competing with Texas, but that was an example where our innovation team was able to secure that investment within the state rather than going anywhere else. So our innovation ecosystem is young, but that means it's also malleable. So if there's anything that you need as an innovative young company, our innovation team is almost always willing to offer a helping hand.
Do you think there's value in the innovation space to have synergistic businesses? So for example, I know when I've worked with clients out of Silicon Valley, we've had a few that have looked at Lawrence, thankfully because of our university here. You know, one of the questions I get is what other companies are like ours in the area? So one, we can find talent, because I think that's an issue. And a lot of times if they're growing something, you know, out of the university or whatever, and they're ready to launch, a lot of times they'll end up in Silicon Valley, they'll end up in Boston, they'll end up in Research Triangle. So have you found the synergistic value something that is lacking in Kansas, or do you think that's something that we can grow?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that finding clusters in the tech space within the Midwest anywhere is relatively difficult. You know, a lot of people are going to look towards the MITs of the world, the Silicon Valleys of the world, and, you know, they think as soon as they get out of an educational institution, it's on to greener pastures. And our job is to try to ensure that they can find that right here within the region. And so we've tried to focus in on some of the critical areas that we think are very well represented in the area, and we've even started to see coalitions formed in order to ensure that those people that are developing in the tech space or in the innovation spaces don't feel alone. So I'll make a plug for the KC Tech Council, which I just met with earlier today in Topeka. They're doing a great job of connecting businesses all across the region that are in the tech space, and you know, spin-off organizations like KC BioHub that connect businesses in the bio space. I think that that's the perfect way to ensure that companies feel that there is an environment and an ecosystem in that industry that they operate within. And so we've seen a proliferation of that in recent years, and I think that that's the critical path that we need to take, because it's true that many people that have entrepreneurial ideas don't see a pathway to success within the state of Kansas. And so I think we're growing that, but I think part of the battle is spreading the awareness and making people believe in the Kansas community. And I think we're seeing a lot of development within the state, within the financial space, in the bio space, in the tech space, and I think that's only going to continue.
That's great news to hear. I'm going to throw you another curveball. How has our current political environment impacted business growth in Kansas?
How do I want to answer this? So, you know, I would say that the effect hasn't necessarily stopped us from doing anything. It's just changed our methods. So, for example, at the federal level, there was, you know, a lot of cutting of waste, fraud, and abuse, you know, as they called it. And, you know, they were looking at states to replicate this. And so in many states across the United States, they were looking to make cuts as well. Luckily, the Kansas Department of Commerce has proven itself enough to where the legislature didn't necessarily target us with the vast majority of those cuts. But what I'll tell you is we've been thrown some curveballs in the realm of We have an office established of the Kansas Women, Minority, and Business Development Office. That is now called the Kansas Small Business Office, because if it was not changed in name, it might not exist anymore. So our task really has been to ensure that we continue the same programs, but ensure that it aligns with the vision of the current administration. And so, being split at our state level with one side of the political aisle and then at the federal level with another, it's just ensured that we really, have fine-tuned everything that we offer, so that nothing is really, we're bulletproofing ourselves, because either side of the political aisle within the state of Kansas has kind of formed a coalition behind commerce. So I think that we're pretty safe, and through the different administrations, we've actually, more so than other states, been able to fine-tune ourselves so that we're never really a target for, any side of the political aisle.
That's very refreshing and good to hear. So if a business owner is just getting started, what is their best way to get engaged with the State Department of Commerce?
You're looking at him. No, I'm just kidding. So anybody from Kansas Department of Commerce, I think, would be a good initial point of contact. I think that there have been times in the past, couple decades ago, and definitely before this administration, where the Department of Commerce was really split. We have a Quality Places division that works with retail and restaurant and small businesses. We have a small business office. We have all these different departments, and they weren't really cohesive. But I think under this current administration, in the last 10 years especially, we've been able to form this cohesive vision. We're all united behind one strategic plan, and we're all pulling in the same direction. So now, when you make your introduction to a person within the Department of Commerce, they're not going to be, self-interested and say, well, hey, only look at my program. I think now they understand that the only way to succeed is if we ensure that a business is aware of every single benefit that's available to them. So I'd say that the best thing that you can do is pick up a phone and reach out to anybody from Kansas Department of Commerce, and even better, meet with them in person. And if that's not an option, meet with them on Teams. Having that face-to-face conversation is amazing. And at the end of the day, all we want to be at Kansas Department of Commerce is another arrow in your quiver or another tool in your toolbox. We don't have an ask from companies. We just want to ensure that companies have the room to grow and excel within the state of Kansas. So that's our only interest.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over if any members of our audience have any questions for Tayton about anything.
This is kind of a two-parter. One, are there any solutions for HPIP or PEAK as related to business structure? For example, we're an ESOP and I don't know how tax incentives would work or something like that.
Absolutely not. If you are an ESOP, C corporation, an LLC, doesn't matter. You are able to utilize our incentives, and that's part of the reason why our HPIP program was designed in the way it is. So the first part is a comprehensive sales tax exemption for any purchases that you make, and the second part is that tax credit. So not only are you able to levy that tax credit against your state tax liability, but since 2019, we actually made it much more lucrative in that you can now sell 50% of those tax credits. So in the state of Kansas, we're looking at a market of 88 to 95 cents on the dollar, which is really good in terms of tax credit sales. So it's definitely a program that I would say to utilize if you're considering even if you're an ESOP. And I'll just say that the question was about the business structure and whether or not there were any exclusions based on business structure.
One small follow-up is, do you have to be headquartered in Kansas? If you're a satellite office, small office here, we still tap into that?
Yeah, so I'd say not necessarily. The question is, do you have to be headquartered within Kansas in order to receive HPIP benefits? So there are a lot of ors when it comes to the HPIP on how you qualify. So first of all, if you're a headquartered or a manufacturer, you immediately qualify for the HPIP program. Now, we also get into you can be a back office or satellite operation for a business that exists nationally. So there are many ways that you can qualify for the HPIP program. And the benefit of operating within Kansas is we're so proximate as a state government that you can literally speak to the guy that's going to make the final determination on whether you qualify, and he'll help you through the process. So Richard Martinez is our HPIP director, and he's happy to engage with businesses on a day-to-day business directly face-to-face to ensure that they're able to receive the benefit.
Kind of two-pronged, two things. You kind of hit on
Mm.
And I think that might be an area that we can really start to thrive. And what I've always thought, and talking to people in the past, was from a business development standpoint, you go to California, you go to the northwest part of the United States, other places where the tax rates are so high, or cost of living is so high, are we making an effort there at all to go out and try to get those companies to start looking at us to say, hey, here's what we have to offer, and be aggressive. I get the small business, that's great, but really boost the needle is those big corporations moving their companies here.
Absolutely, you're 100% right. And just for the viewers of the video here, he generally was speaking about how the cost of living is much higher in different regions of the United States, and how do we utilize that messaging within the state of Kansas in order to recruit businesses. Is that a fair assessment? So I would say within the state of Kansas, that's absolutely the messaging we use. In fact, it was so important that we got the messaging right to the current administration that they developed a Marcoms team on the Kansas Department of Commerce. Prior to, I want to say 2018, there was no marketing and communications done by Kansas Department of Commerce. It was essentially, you find us and then you can utilize our incentives. Now our outreach goes so far beyond what it ever has. And absolutely, the things we're talking about are quality of life, safe place to live, cheaper gas. I mean, there are so many things that we market, and even just logistically, being in the center of the United States, limited congestion, although I do drive on 69 and 35 and understand that there is some, but it pales in comparison to some of those major hubs across the country. So absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. In our recruitment efforts internationally and within the United States, the selling point is absolutely the cost of living, the business environment. We're not overloaded with bureaucratic red tape. We're not. We try to make it as easy as possible for businesses to succeed within the state, and we definitely don't see that everywhere. So,
Corporate tax rate's a lot better than the West Coast for sure. So
100%.
That made me want to ask, what if a company wanted to transfer jobs from another state here and relocate employees here? Are there incentives for that?
Brilliant question. So he asked if a company was looking to transfer jobs from one state to another, whether that was possible. So I'll tell you, we do have a border war truce with the state of Missouri. Other state. Okay. Yeah, so if it's any other state, absolutely. And we look at net new jobs to the state of Kansas. We understand that the business environment isn't always the brightest in every state, and so we welcome with open arms any state that. So all of our incentive programs, whether it be Peak or Kid and Kerr, will be eligible to those net new employees to the state of Kansas. And I'll tell you that even though we have had a border war truce, which we still operate within, Missouri recently did repeal their side of the border war truce. So we'll see how that goes. We're looking to continue that, but I'll keep you posted if it changes.
Any other questions?
You mentioned earlier there are some restrictions. What are those specific restricted industries, and what's your golden child? Where do you see your most activity or greatest successes? Is there one specific manufacturing?
So my region of the state, I would say, so the question is in regards to what is the best target sector and what are some specific restrictions in terms of NAICS codes or types of businesses. So I'd say, I cover a 4-county region like was mentioned, and that's Wyandotte, Douglas, Shawnee, and Johnson. And actually, I'd say that the best projects that I have seen have developed out of professional services. So companies headquartered across the state of Kansas, like WellSky, Kiewit Engineering, other companies, that just have large presences in the state of Kansas, or a large presence in the state of Kansas, rather, are absolutely some of the golden children. So I'd say professional services, and then manufacturing is our wheelhouse. I mean, if you're a manufacturer within the state of Kansas, you're already 85% of the way there in terms of being incentivized. And so I would say that, manufacturing is definitely our target industry, although professional services, innovative technologies, all of those things are things that we're looking at. And again, even if you don't meet any of those NAICS codes, there are certain cases in which you could qualify. So the best thing you can do if you're in any gray area or if you're unsure is just to meet with us, because we have the HPIP manager on hand, and in the end he's the one making the final determination. So yeah, good question. Thank you.
Tayton, thank you very much for joining us today. This was really helpful information. We will make sure and put out information how to get in direct contact with Tayton and his team at the Kansas Department of Commerce and with some follow-ups, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you.